This is Advanced Community Studies. We're doing something a little off from our usual episode by episode model because we are lucky enough to have one of the producers of Community and also one of the producers of Scrubs, which I'm sure we're going to talk about as well. Welcome to the show, Neil Goldman. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me.
So let's, I suppose, start at the very beginning, as the song goes. How did you come to be involved with Community?
Community was, it was a meeting simply with Garrett Donovan, my writing partner, myself, and Dan Harmon, who we did not know prior to that. I think we were actually invited to the original table read for the pilot. So we briefly met Dan there afterwards because we had a quick rewrite session. It was a really, really good pilot. The pilot that's on air, I think, was very similar to what we read at the table, and that's not always the case. Sometimes pilots have a long journey from the first table read to actually getting the show in the can, but it was a sort of came out fully formed from Dan. So it was a quick and easy punch-up sessions where we briefly met Dan, and then once the show was shot and NBC was looking to pick it up, they were looking to pair Dan up with some more experienced, quote-unquote experienced showrunner types or TV writer types. Dan, having come to this really with no staff writer experience. He had plenty of writing experience and movies and stuff, but he hadn't been on a television staff and wasn't too, he was a very, very, very quick learner. But, when in those types of situations, the network and studio like to have the experienced people there as well to sort of, help point the creator in the right direction and guide him or her and be there as sort of, backup and support. And that's how we loved the pilot when we saw it. And we really enjoyed I think our first meeting with Dan, you have to understand, usually these meetings are 20 minutes, half hour. Our first meeting with Dan was 2.5 hours. And it could have probably gone longer had the lot not start shutting down, just because we were enjoying shooting the shit about lots of things and writing and the show and going character by character. And I think he sort of took us on recommendation on Blind Faith from Sony and from NBC, and we were very happy he did. We were coming off of having had some executive producer experience, show running experience on Scrubs, and he was, he sort of recognized also and wanted someone there to who knew how this game was played week in, week out, and it was a great partnership for 3 years.
Awesome.
Yeah. So you are on the first 3 seasons of Community. And you got to see the show become this bananas thing that it would become. And I'm not a professional interviewer, so I'm wondering, what was it like to see these processes taking place, the story pitches getting weirder and weirder and weirder as the show went along?
It was really interesting and cool, and the way the show evolved was to some degree, a very large degree, just a product of what Dan's vision for the show was. But Dan's vision, I think, also evolved even over the course of the first season. Dan set a very high standard from the start as far as what he wanted these episodes to be. It quickly went from just we got to knock it out of the park with these episodes in terms of the stories we tell, having them be about something, having them be very character centric at the same time, sort of maintaining his comedic voice. But then it evolved very quickly into literally wanting to sort of the ambition being no less than reinventing the wheel every episode, if not the story wheel or the story circle, which I'm sure you guys have heard about. But, I think some of it was just also realizing, our plan from the beginning was very specific. When we had our first sort of writers meeting with Dan, we decided, 3 of us really decided, Garrett, Dan and I, first 6 episodes would be about, with Jeff at the center of each episode, but the pair be very meticulous about pairing Jeff off in an A story with a different member of that study group in the first 6 episodes. And if you notice, the first 6, we really do go down the list. Abed, Shirley gets one, Britta gets one. The idea there was, while it was important for Jeff to be front and center because he was more than anybody the fish out of water, we at the same time tell a story that was about Jeff, but was also more specifically about Jeff's relationship with somebody else that shed light on another character. Because you're so limited in a pilot episode, and one of the things that I remember the critics, when they weren't sure what the show was, would level against the show was off that pilot episode was they were just sort of leveling, accusations that it was a little, not accusations, that's the wrong word, but like their criticism, they're critics after all, that maybe the characters around the table were a little stereotypical in the way they were painted. And again, that's really more about the fact that you only have so much time in 20 minutes to establish everybody. So Dan was very adamant in the first 6 episodes about making sure we understood that those characters were all 3-dimensional people, that he was interested in we were all interested in sort of subverting using those stereotypes to surprise people, like people would have certain expectations because of those stereotypes, or those archetypes is a better word, right? Archetypes for certain characters. And let's sort of try to pull the rug out in terms of people's expectations early on. And then after those first 6, we were still finding our legs. But what we were also finding, as I recall, was that it was hard to, you need stakes in an episode of television to make people care. It's such a networky note word. Like, what are the stakes of the episode? We would make fun of network execs all the time for asking about the stakes. But even there in the writer's room, you're like, the stories have to be about something you have to care. And we were finding it a little hard to make people care because we didn't care about for instance, what grades these characters got from their professors. Like, nothing about being
Sure.
The tricky part about being set in a community college is that community college, while it may be more the quote unquote real world than Ivy League universities or what have you, you're still in a bubble. These characters are in school. And so aside from the student-teacher relationships, obviously we were more interested in the interpersonal relationships between our characters, but even there it was like sometimes a little hard to come by what was interesting and compelling about a show set in a community college. And that is why it's always been sort of my theory. That's partially why we started getting bigger and wilder, because we sort of said, to hell with necessarily painting this place as a super realistic, community college. As long as the characters and their relationships remain grounded and remain real, and the emotions remained real and grounded, it gave us license, we found, to get weirder with sort of the more surface details of the school and have zombies floating around and have, a paintball contests get totally out of control. And certainly certain characters being in the show helped us. Abed, for instance, being such a pop culture aficionado, made those type of creative choices seem organic, where maybe otherwise they would not have. But Dan was also very smart, because he knew that if he did a paintball episode, it couldn't just feel like a sketch. It couldn't feel like, in other words, when you're doing a parody, and oftentimes we veered into parody, like the Goodfellas episode. Remember, we were parodying mob movies with chicken fingers.
Yeah, sure.
When you do parody, you run the risk of like people going, "Oh, okay, I get the joke, but so what? Like, what are you telling me about what real story you're telling within the parody to make us care and make us stay tuned, even for those 20 minutes?" And so a lot of time was spent. In a weird way, the harder part was not coming up. I'm sorry if I'm all over the map, guys. It's just sort of consciousness.
Let it go.
But the harder part, and the part that Dan was so good at, and the writing staff was so good, it was a great writing staff, top to bottom, was figuring out ways. Sometimes if we started with the high concept, we started with, hey, wouldn't it be funny if Abed became a mob boss of this chicken finger, crime syndicate at school? It was always like, okay, well, that's funny and that's fun, and we know all the jokes that come along with it. But how do you now? The hard part really was figuring out how to tether it, and remember, that became about Jeff and Abed's sort of the power dynamics within the study group being shifted and being put on the other foot. And until that's an example of an episode that I will say evolved a lot from the table read to when we shot it 5 days later, because it had there was a whole other element in there. I'll try to see if I could find the table draft and shoot it to you guys if you're interested. But there's a whole other storyline in there involving Troy, and I can't remember what, but it was sort of like muddying. It was getting in the way of what the episode wanted to be, which is about this Jeff Abed power struggle within the group. And so, we were very proud of all those episodes. They were very labor intensive, both from a writing standpoint. We used to call them concept episodes. The paintballs, the advanced Dungeons and Dragons, the remedial chaos theories. Those were those were the nights that Dan was just like pulling all-nighters and making sure everybody sort of, at the same time, not settling for anything less than what he felt, reaching the maximum potential of each episode. And those are the ones certainly that people seem to talk a lot most about, and I think really at the end, put us on the map.
Yeah, sure.
I'll stop talking so you guys can talk, but
Fine.
They've heard us talk enough. The people that listen to this show, they want to you actually did the thing. So
you're the breath of fresh air from them.
Right? from our fucking nonsense.
Well, then shut up. Let me talk. I don't want you guys to have a 2.5 hour meeting with me. But the reality is, you've talked to a number of writers I know, and other podcasts have, and we could go on and on, because I've often said you could do a separate book or pamphlet anyway, thick pamphlet about just the way some of these episodes were made and how they evolved and how crazy it was. The zombie episode taking us, probably where normally it takes about a week to break a story in a room, to come up with the story and the outline, maybe 2 weeks on a show like Community that was a high level of difficulty. That took about 8 weeks, I think.
Wow.
To figure out, because we outlined it and it wasn't working, and we rewrote it, and then we shot it and it still wasn't working. We rewrote some more of it and had to go in there and reshoot a bunch of it. I've got a call sheet for, remember the episode with the fake clip show episode with the fake memories? I forget what it's called. I think it's Paradigms of Human Memory, maybe.
Yeah.
Those were all obviously clips that they weren't clips. They were things we had to go around and shoot. And I have a call sheet somewhere that says day 6 of 5 on that one. And then the other thing about that one was it took 6 days when normally you're budgeted for 5 to go all around town, because we had to leave the lot to get a lot of those scenes shot. But not only that, but once it came in and once we edited it together, it was 4 minutes short, which is why it has that really weird flash animation at the end of it that has nothing to do with the rest of the episode. I think may have had something to do with it. I can't remember, Justin Brown. But it was literally because, oh shit, you have to deliver a show at least 20 minutes and 20 seconds or whatever it is. And here we are. We spent way more money than we were supposed to be making that. We could not hand it to NBC and go, here's 17 minutes of show. The solution there was just to kind of come up with a little self-contained, weird, animated, I don't know what it was. So, it was as a writer, it was really an amazing place to be, because we were just really making sure that we were, or at least trying at Dan's, following Dan's lead to tell stories in ways they haven't been told and do things we haven't seen on television before.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that I left when Dan left after year 3, and I wasn't able to come back. I was working on something else by then. But 6 seasons of it, or whatever you want to say. But technically 6 seasons, right, of a show that should have been 6 and out.
Right.
Based on just how not based on the quality, but because of how I think of how good it came out and how specific it was. I remember we were shocked when we went to Comic-Con and saw that reception that it got after season 1, because we were just making the show and it wasn't doing great numbers, but people were out there. Turns out people were out there watching it, and the people that were watching it were really watching it, like you guys.
Yeah,
we were very appreciative of that.
Of course.
You guys got this crazy resurgence with Netflix picking it up, and a bunch of people who somehow hadn't discovered the show, like or just discovering it.
Yeah, I mean, it was another. Yeah, there was this whole other wave of people. For some reason, it's always been available on Hulu.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But something about Netflix, and like, look, it was on Hulu forever. So Netflix, it was being new to Netflix. They went out and promoted it, made a little bit of a splash, which I think was part of it. There was no real reason for Hulu to do so, having had the show for 6 years.
Right.
And you guys will start seeing it, I think, pop up other places too. But yeah, it has this whole other life now, which is huge, right? Most of these podcasts have popped up really in the wake of that. It seems like.
Mm-hmm.
I
think certainly why we got started.
Exactly. I think there's seriously like 15 podcasts covering Community right now, and that's not even like an exaggerated number.
Did you guys find it on Netflix? Or did you
no, I started watching it in 2010. I was late. I didn't catch it when it was on. Right. I mean, I guess I could have caught it when it was on air, because it was 2010 was before.
You were like end of season 1, beginning of season 2. I think it's 2010.
Oh, it was 2014 then. Yep, it wasn't after high school. It was after college. 2014.
Oh, okay. I was about to say, you were only 8 years old back then, so.
Right, exactly. I was a baby, but it was my favorite show.
It was my favorite. I started in 2014, so I had like the Yahoo season to wait out for.
Got it.
So I caught it on Hulu.
Well, not everybody, certainly not by any means did everybody find it when it was on the first go-round. And who knew, if it wasn't for streaming, if it wasn't for the fact that, for whatever reason, this was a show that always did well on Hulu, because it was sort of, I don't know, just sort of, I guess it was the groups that it appealed to knew how to, even at that, when it was sort of beginning streaming, they knew how to do it.
Right, yeah. Right. They were the young, tech-savvy people, yeah.
The nerds.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, a bunch of dorks. Yeah, I was a day one watcher. I just remember being, and I'm going to, out myself as a child, but I was like junior year of high school when Community was kicking up, and I remember just seeing those ads for like Joel McHale describing the Greendale water fountains, and there were those weird ads of like him and Chevy going back and forth, just like making fun of each other for 30 solid seconds. And I convinced my girlfriend's family at the time, like, we all need to watch this, like everyone. And I got them very into Community season 1.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, look, one of the things about, I remember there were critics. Being critics, there were people who said, like, some of the gimmicks, or what they called gimmicks, meaning like paintball, or the structural gimmicks, like I guess devices is a better word. The fact that we used like nonlinear storytelling and whatever, they found it distancing. They found it like hard to sort of plug into the characters, because maybe they felt the show was kind of like saying, look at me. It was being meta, right, a lot, and being self-referential. Mm-hmm. I think for the NBC audience at the time, it might have been a little hard for them to get it. It took a little work to watch the show and to be able to appreciate all of that and not have it be a distraction. The fact that it was trying to do something different. But no, we were grateful for the people that were there from day one, and because they for sure kept it on. I mean, it's, again, the fact that there are 108 some odd episodes of the show is amazing. And then the fans finding it now, breathing new life into it, is also just huge, and bodes well for maybe seeing it in some form again in the future.
Yeah, need that movie stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's anything can happen for sure, more than ever now.
Yeah.
So I'm optimistic. I have no news on that front or any secret to share, other than like any other fan right now, I'm rooting for it.
You could have shot our numbers through the roof right there, man. If we broke this story somehow, it's
Even
okay.
if I could, I think I'd have to leave. I have to leave that to Chevy. No, I'd have to leave that to Dan.
Yeah, Chevy's gonna break it on Cameo. One of his $250 cameos.
Exactly. I also I have a great picture somewhere of Chevy's reaction when we got the pickup, season 2 pickup. I have to find it and show you guys. I guess it's not really helpful on a podcast to show pictures, but
I mean, I'm not gonna say no because I'd love it.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll describe it. We'll paint a visual. We'll paint a picture.
To the viewers at wherever they are, or the listeners, it's basically a face plant, but like just a true look of of dismay. Not because he didn't like the show, just because he's Chevy. And,
Yeah, sure.
Oh, they're gonna pay me to keep working on this show people like.
He was cantankerous. I think there's a very good chance that we'll see more community in some form. Everybody seems willing to do it. All the important people. That's the most important.
Yeah, that's the dream. That's the dream.
Cool.
I talked to Yvette Nicole Brown earlier today, and like even she brought up wanting to bring people back, and that it's something that people like talking about. So like, just do it.
I think we'll see. I think we'll see something. I mean, it's done. I believe it's done very well for Netflix, and at the very least, if not like another season of it, then that movie feels like it's within reach.
Yeah, for sure.
Dan's really the most important piece of that puzzle, and he seems up for it. So let's hope.
Oh yeah, we can only hope. So I think a lot of our listeners who maybe are not on the production side of things would be curious to know, like, what was your general responsibilities on the show as like a producer, an executive producer? I don't think a lot of people know what that entails. If you want to speak to that a little bit.
Sure. I mean, there's lots of titles that you see scrolling on that screen. Most of them are just fancy writer titles. The executive producer generally, sometimes they hand those out also to what they call non-writing producers. Russ Krasnoff and Gary Foster, I think. It's been a while. Yeah, Foster. They were the non-writing executive producers who Dan first sat down with and pitched a show to them. And they took it and made a deal with Sony. So that was sort of their role, they hear pitches from writers and take a minute. The show gets on the air, they get an executive producer credit. The creator of the show, 99% of the time, is an executive producer, and they're the showrunner. They're the ones who the buck stops with creatively, who are responsible for the writing of the show and the editing of the show. Ultimately, they get final cut, and they're down on set making sure it's blocked right and the jokes are landing. And it's kind of like being the CEO of a company. Really, it's a very intense job. We were co-showrunners with Dan on that show, not in the sense that we were making the creative decisions. In fact, if we had any role early on, it was making sure everybody knew that Dan was very, very clearly capable of making all of the creative decisions on the show and should be making all the creative decisions on the show. Because sometimes what happens is when there's an inexperienced showrunner, the tendency is to mitigate that by having people like me, but also 5 other executive producers floating around as a safety net. But that can also get tricky because chain of command isn't always clear. And I think Garrett and I very early on were, one of our biggest contributions to the show was really trying to help everybody see that that Dan had a vision and that Dan should be certainly the one. And he was the one from day one, but everybody needs to really understand that and embrace it and not and let him do his Advanced Dungeons and Dragons and let him do his crazy show, his crazy timeline episodes, 7 timeline episodes, which when you pitch it to a network, you can imagine the blood coming out of their ears when they hear it. It's nothing. And again, even if they have faith, they're worried or concerned that people aren't going to understand it when they watch it. But you just have to, Dan became the most powerful showrunner in Hollywood when he was fired and then brought back because he basically said, "Look, if you don't want me to run the show, then I'll leave the show." and then he left the show. I guess some powers that be didn't want him to be in charge anymore. But then guess what? He was back a year later because they saw what Garrett and I were alluding to, which is that, it's a different show without Dan there. It just needs to be run through his brain. There are other titles like supervising producer, producers, story editors. Those are all like writer titles, and there's literally a hierarchy of writers. Dan was very much an egalitarian in the writers' room. Some writers' rooms, you tend to the higher the people who are higher ranked, the co-executive producers, the supervising producers, they're expected to speak more, take on more responsibility, and take up more of the real estate in the room in terms of airtime, like I am now again. But and where the lower level people have to sort of be careful and choose their spots, and but Dan would have none of that, being sort of the iconoclast that he is, and that was sort of the advantage of one of the many advantages of not having grown up in the system. Was like, he's like, why does it have to be that way? Why if Megan Gans is a story editor on the show, but I think she's amazing, why shouldn't she be take the reins of her episode and run with it, and let's not worry about titles, and she did, and other people did, and it turned out great. And then you've got the production side. Usually when you see produced by on the opening credits, that's the line producer. They're the ones who are in charge of making sure the script we hand them actually can get made. On Community was Patrick Kinlan with The Patience of a Saint, and would never say no, and sort of take a lot of heat from the studio when we went over budget by $400,000, but would figure out a way to get Subway, do an episode about Subway, so that Subway would pay us $400,000 to balance the budget. Little did something know that we would name a character after that, and then imply that said character got a finger shoved up his ass during sex. Which is in the title of that episode, right? Everybody knows that. Digital exploration of such and such. That's what digital exploration means. It alludes to the joke.
Oh, the finger digit exploration. Oh my god.
Oh my god.
There's a little Easter egg for you. What's the name of that episode?
Wow. Digital exploration of interior design.
That's the butt, fellas.
Yeah.
Wow. And not the only Community episode named after a butt. And that is something you just gotta appreciate about this show.
And I don't think there's anything about that episode that has to do with interior design. It's got blanket fort stuff. And wait, maybe I'm wrong. Hold on, I'm looking it up. That was the
maybe you're just making it all up.
That may have been just a weird fever dream. That was the pillow fort episode. What was the Subway episode?
That was both. It was the first of the 2-part Pillow Fort episodes with the full on war.
Yeah, it was before Pillows and Blankets. Yeah.
Okay. So, anyway, that's where. So interior design was about the pillow forts, but digital exploration was about Subway.
It's about the finger of Subway's ass. Oh wow, that is truly beautiful. That's the best thing.
Yeah, that's gonna change. That's incredible.
There's more fun. There's a lot. I mean, that was another fun part of the show. It was all the little. You guys know about the Beetlejuice one, right?
Yeah,
of course. Yeah,
of course.
And my favorite one. That was Megan, I believe, Gans, but that was her idea. But then there was Annie. Then there was Annie's boobs grabbing the pen. You could actually see him grab the pen, which was another thing we didn't like focus on, but people found on their own. That was cool. It was another fun part of working on that show. But anyway, getting back to your little question. So then that line producer is in charge of making sure we have the sets we need, and we have the actors we need, and we're doing it all on budget. And the budget sometimes went off the rails, but if it did, it meant we had to make it up somewhere else. By the way, that episode I just referred to, the one where the pen was stolen, that's a bottle episode. I think Abed talks about bottle episodes in that. And the reason it's called a bottle episode in business is that it usually happens when the show's over budget and they don't want to spend any money on swing sets, and they just want people to be in one room. They want to shoot it quickly. So you do a bottle episode to make up some of the money that you spent on killing people with paintballs.
Yeah, sure.
And day 6 of 5. So that's sort of the quick story. Well, not quick. Nothing I say is quick, but that's sort of the rundown of writers versus, and then showrunners. While they're primarily involved in the writing of the show, they have to have some awareness of the budget, and they work in concert with the line producer. And there's a lot of times on Community where we were coming up with stuff so last minute that we were shooting things like really by the skin of our teeth. And I mean, what I mean by that is, usually you have a week of prep time. Usually the director and the producer has a script the week before you shoot the episode, and they have a whole week to make sure that all the elements are in place, the costumes, the cast. Well, on Community, we would that lead time would burn up very quickly, and directors unfortunately weren't able to prep because we didn't have a script for them to prep off of. All we had was an outline on the board or a story circle on the board, and we had to come in and somehow, with the line producer, say, okay, here's what we think is going to happen, just so that when everybody showed up to shoot that scene, sometimes the next day, all of the physical things we needed to shoot the scene would be there. There was one episode toward the end of season 3, I think, where we showed up and we couldn't start shooting because they were still building the set or painting it, because we literally gave them the pages for what we needed 5 hours before. So it was pretty nerve-wracking at times, because the high level of difficulty meant long hours, meant deadlines that were often missed. But at the end of the day, that crew got that show in the can. That's all that matters, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And all those crazy last minute additions and crazy story ideas are why we're still talking and podcasting about this en masse, 11 years after the show debuted, 5 years since there's been a new episode. Your hard work was worth it. The stress was worth it, I promise.
It was. And by the way, it paid off not just in terms of the fandom, which is great, but the studio and the network were coming at it from they're at the end of the day, they're bottom line, they're companies, they're corporations. And, the big part of the reason that Dan was left after year 3 or was fired or quit or whatever it was there was a desire for the show to be quote unquote normalized. Like Dan's vision didn't necessarily line up with the vision of NBC and Sony at the time, where they just thought the show could be bigger, a bigger hit, and therefore worth more money if it wouldn't do these Dungeons and Dragons episodes. They were really afraid of that one. They were afraid that people wouldn't care about Fat Neil because he wasn't a character in the show. We had to argue but he's a character that's suicidal because of something that Jeff said to him. I think we're going to care. Jeff's on the hook for this. They were just afraid by Dungeons and Dragons being at the time maybe more niche than it is now, certainly. But they were just thought people would literally turn intelligent and go, "What the hell is this?" and turn it off. And maybe they were right, but it's a double-edged sword because it's that same, like you guys are saying, it's that same quality that made it special and got the fan loyalty and allows it to continue to build an audience. And by the way, again, as far as those companies are concerned, I'm sure they're doing fine with it being on Netflix and having on all these services.
Yeah, sure.
So, Netflix may have existed back then. I don't think it existed. I think it was just a DVD exchange website back then. I don't think they had any programming. So no one could have anticipated it. By virtue of the old business model, it could have easily been a show that was on, even with its 6 seasons, went away, didn't really do that well in syndication, kind of disappeared. But streaming came along at the exact right time for this show. And it allowed it to be profitable and have a much wider audience.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Netflix started streaming in 2007, it says, but that means there's probably an 18-month period before people started picking it up, and then the show starts, and then it's incredible.
Yeah, and it was just the fact that again, it's been streaming on Hulu this whole time, but also Hulu had a 6-year, I think, exclusive. Because you remember Hulu was streaming shows as they were airing.
Yeah.
And so once that exclusivity window ran out, and Sony, the studio, was able to sell the show elsewhere, and found a lot of very avid, hungry buyers because of just where we're at in terms of streaming boom now. All these
Right.
look at all these. They won't all last, unfortunately. Probably it'll be survival of the fittest, but you've got like 7 or 8 big ones now.
Yeah.
Where you used to just have 2 back then, and even that sort of really helped Community. It was very good timing for it.
Yeah,
absolutely. Community
Peacock
was part
launched.
of the Peacock just launched, and Community was on Yahoo Screen there for a hot second.
And killed I think it killed Yahoo Screen.
I think Yahoo Screen was dead. Community was just around when they found the body. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think Yahoo Screen was moribund before Community showed up.
Not here to dance on a great
Screen's ass.
That's exactly right.
But Yahoo Screen didn't make it. But hey, we have them to thank for season 6. So
that's right.
So they served their purpose as far as we're concerned.
Yeah, use them and then cast them aside.
Yeah.
We got what we needed out of them, which was another season of Community, which is beautiful. So were there?
Sorry,
go ahead.
No,
I just had another question. You can go ahead if you were saying.
No, I'm done. That was going to be really boring.
Okay. Were there, if you can remember at this point, were there any episode ideas or story ideas that you or anyone else really latched onto but never quite made it? You couldn't break the story, or they just maybe they proved phenomenally too expensive. Was there anything that was like left on the cutting room floor?
There probably was, but nothing is coming to memory. And there I will say this: there are plenty of times during the process of many of those episodes where I thought that was going to be the fate of said episode. Whether it was because it was just overly ambitious production-wise, or it was Sunday night and we were at somebody's house trying to figure out the second episode of Paintball in season 2 and we still had nothing. But somehow, again, Dan and that crew of writers, we were always able to pull it out. I remember there were certain episodes that there are still episodes I still don't quite entirely get. Like the Dreamatorium one always hurts my head. And I still sometimes like feel like that episode itself was like a weird dream, and have to actually go check to make sure we actually made that. But that's symptomatic of the fact that it was like all of these things, so many things, and I'll be the one to admit it. There are plenty of times where Dan used to say, "You're pouring." I forget what he used to yell at me about. He used to yell at me for a lot of things, but one of them was like, "You're pouring bleach in the embryo." I was like, "What? How did we get to embryos?" But actually, Dan did. He used to talk about it like we would have the embryo. He meant it slightly differently. He used to talk about it in terms of a story embryo. Like if you had your act breaks, he basically said like if you knew where your act breaks were, then you had 90% of it. You had to get from point A to point B. But if you knew what those act breaks were, those big moments in the story where the big story turns happened, you knew what it was. I remember Dan was the script was flipped on my Dinner with Andre Pulp Fiction episode, where Dan kept saying to me, I remember, like, does this make any sense whatsoever? And I was the one sort of being the one rallying him, going, I'm telling you this works. And it wasn't because it was my brainstorm, just because it was a really weird episode that seemed like it had a very loose structure, especially the Dinner with Andre stuff with Abed and Jeff. And one of my proudest contributions was because of my relationship with Bill Lawrence was shuffling Danny over to the Cougar Town set so we could shoot him out as an extra, and so that would hopefully amuse some people when that aired. So in other words, there are plenty of times during the making of the episode that me or somebody would like go, "Are we really fucking doing this? How does it work?" But I don't know that too many things died. There was the zombie episode is a good example of like there was a tenaciousness on Dan's part, on the Russo's part, as sort of the house directors and executive producers, certainly on the writers' part, to make these high concept, crazy, big productions make sense. And the hard part, like I said, was not necessarily coming up with the high concept. It's easy enough to say, hey, let's do a Goodfellas parody. Let's do an Ocean's 11 parody. Let's do a Law and Order parody. That's easy to say. Concepts aren't hard to come by, especially when you're trying to, like I said, parody means it's, you're parodying something that exists, a genre that exists already. That part's easy. The hard part was figuring out how to make it so that the parody was in service of the characters and not the other way around, if that makes sense.
Sure.
That was incredibly time consuming, and that was the stuff when it was not clear right away, or even if it wasn't clear on day 5, where you go, I don't know how we're going to make this work. But I think there may be episodes, if I look back, where some worked much better than others, I'm sure, but for the most part, I think it worked out fine, except for Dreamatorium, which is crazy. Yeah, it was a very efficient in that respect. There were no ideas that didn't get on television that came up.
Do you have a favorite 3 episodes? Because I'm making someone pick their number one favorites, like putting 2 children in front of you and making you pick your favorite. It's unfair. Do you have like a top 3?
Yes, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, for me, I have to put Modern Warfare up there because it was like I was like, oh shit, like we can do this kind of stuff, Like it sort of opened the Pandora's box, or whatever the positive version of that is, of the possibilities in terms of storytelling that we could do, and so not just from a viewership standpoint, but from a sort of evolution of the show standpoint, that was a milestone. And then, actually, I mean, there's certainly more than 3 too, also. But the other 2 I mentioned already, I think are big favorites for me. Goodfellas, the chicken fingers one. Every time the Layla song starts playing, it makes me smile. I remember that was one place where I was like going to throw myself on a grenade to make sure we got the rights to that song, because I was like, I don't know, it just felt perfect that we were that was playing over the revenge of Abed, and I really love the Pulp Fiction Dinner with Andre one also. Those are definitely 3 big ones for me. And Remedial Chaos Theory was I think amazing, and Some Cheating. And that's 4, and this is my last one. 5 would be Professor Professorson, and the Conspiracy Theory one was all.
Yes,
that was
we just talked about that episode. It's incredible.
That was a giant pain in the ass to figure out, especially the end of it with the guns and what was going on. Like, that was the fear, is always that it's called, like we call it, some writers' rooms, they say it's like you're building a bridge to nowhere. Like, you have a great first 2 acts, but you cannot figure out how to end the story. And the ending of the story is kind of the most important part, because if you shit the ending of the story, the takeaway is going to be, that didn't really work.
Right.
That's true of movies. That's true. The reverse is true too. There's some movies where you're like, and then the ending is amazing, and you walk out, at least for a little while, going, it wasn't so bad. That one was like a one where all of our ears were bleeding. And finally, I think it was Chris, combination of Ken and Dan, came up with that. And I actually have the show gifts that year were Greendale. The wrap gifts were Greendale time hoodies that we made for everybody. But that's another one that I love. I've never seen season 4. I have seen season 5 and 6, and I started to watch it, and again, some of my friends worked on that show, and it wasn't that they and some of the original writers worked on that show. Again, and it's to no fault of their own. I think there are good episodes I've heard in there. It just, I don't know if it was psychological or what. Knowing Dan wasn't there behind it was like, I kind of just, I watched one and I was like, it just doesn't even sound like the show to me. And I don't know if it was psychological. I was like, the voices, So, we literally used to call it harmonization. Who's that?
Oh no!
Has Jace arrived? Jace has arrived.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we
I
can.
didn't know. We got to start all over again.
Yeah, we gotta retract
From
all
the
the
top.
things you
From
said.
the top.
No. Fuck me. I don't matter. Keep going.
Jace is an important actor type person and had, some like obligations before this. So they were late, but I'm glad you could show up to the party all the same.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I feel oddly at home. It's almost like I do this regularly.
Yeah, so anyway, we're done.
All right. Well, it was nice talking to you. See.
We've wrapped. Yeah.
I know where to be, and as you can see, I'm capable of rambling on and on.
Then you, my friend, are in the right place because we can go an entire hour of pre-show talking about Star Wars and superheroes, and then go, oh yeah, we do a show about Community.
We gotta press go on the podcast machine before I have to go to sleep and wake up for work in the morning. So you mentioned Bill Lawrence, so it's a perfect way to now, like I think 10-15 minutes later, talk about another one of my favorite shows that you worked on, which was Scrubs. And I'm curious how you came onto that show, if you were friends with Bill, and maybe what that process was like.
We were not friends with Bill. I met him once in a nightclub when he was drunk and he had weird peroxided hair. Not that there's anything wrong with dyed hair. All my kids have dyed hair right now. What was I going to say? So I did not know. I knew just of his work on Spin City, which I enjoyed. I knew of him as sort of a wonderkind 25-year-old hotshot who Gary David Goldberg, decided was going to be the next big thing, and they paired up obviously to create that show, which I enjoyed. It was just really just our agents. We were at the same agency, which didn't hurt. He read a sample that Garrett and I wrote. I think it was a news radio sample script, which is another show that should be rediscovered if you guys don't know it or people in general don't know it, because it's great. And it was a big influence, but a lot of people, I think. We just had a meeting with Bill off of a spec script he wrote. I actually think in retrospect, I think he once said like, "Oh, I was actually going to hire somebody else, but that person took another job." So you guys were. That's the way the business works. It just could have been gone a whole different way, but we ended up getting that job as relatively young writers. I was going through some of those titles. We weren't even producer title. We were like executive story editor, which is like third-year writer. I was coming off of Family Guy, being there for a couple seasons before that got canceled, and then we did some time on another show that went 13 episodes and got canceled, and then we went on to Scrubs, and that was eight years on that show, which is
wow,
which is crazy. And eight years of, I think, or most of those seasons, 22 episodes. So it was a lot of time spent on that show, and also a great place to I consider Dan one of my mentors too, even though I was there sort of in a weird way to mentor him. He ended up mentoring Gary, like in terms of how to go about it and how to navigate the studio network and such, not in terms of writing, but he was a mentor, I feel like, on the writing side. Like I said, showing us how you can. We did some of that on Scrubs. There were episodes of Scrubs we did that we used to call concept episodes also, where we played with the form a little bit. We did one that was like took place in front of a multi-camera audience with a laugh track. So Bill's sort of, as much as I say modern warfare, rather expanding my mind what we do in Community, the reality was, we were doing some of that boundary pushing and format experimentation on Scrubs under Bill. So go back and erase that. No, I'm kidding. It was taken to a whole other level in Community. Don't get me wrong, but it was, in a weird way, it was a great, on a number of levels, great experience that shaped that we brought to Community, like not just in terms of working with an ensemble like Scrubs was an ensemble and Community was obviously, but in terms of always making sure that as Scrubs had its fantasies and had its flashbacks and had its wackiness, making sure even among all of that, we were telling a story, like I said, an interpersonal story between characters. Hopefully had some that were moving, because that's really the secret sauce, like landing some emotion. Like you could be as funny as whatever, but in a television show, the thing that makes you really invested in the characters are those emotional moments where you come to like them and care about them. And that's what kind of really brings you back. So we brought some of that knowledge into Community. Dan didn't need to be told that, but it was something we tried to keep up. No, it was a great place to learn. Bill also, as the seasons wore on, we also sometimes we're very cutting it very close in terms of the writing to versus production. So that's where we learned, quote unquote, guerrilla filmmaking, meaning like not having a script. Like literally, there was one week where we were supposed to, shows usually start on Monday and wrap on Friday at a half-hour comedy takes 5 days to shoot over the course of the week. It was Friday, and we had to shoot an episode for next week. And Bill said, "All right, we don't have a script. We don't have an idea. Our backs are up against the wall. We can't force a hiatus and cost $200,000 to the studio. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to come up with a little self-contained sea story between Turk and whoever. And we're going to write that on Friday. We're going to shoot that on Monday, but we still don't know what the rest of the episode is." On Monday, we were shooting an episode while we were in the writer's room, outlining the rest of it, coming up with and outlining the rest of that episode, and then writing only the scenes the night before they were going to shoot. Now, for better or for worse, we knew how to do that. We went to Community, so we may have been enablers to some degree to the like early on with Dan. I think it didn't exactly unfold like this, but there was a moment where Dan was like, "Well, can we do that?" And it was a crossroads where Garrett and I could either go, "No, you can't do that," and probably have a more sane existence, or we would go, "Yeah, you can. Here's how you do it. Everybody's gonna hate us, but we're just gonna write the scenes that we're gonna shoot the next day, and do it that way." And some of those episodes that I quoted to you that were my favorite were for better or for worse, were made that way. Certainly, My Dinner with Andre, Pulp Fiction, whatever that one was called, was done that way. In fact, Danny Pudi is oftentimes reading off of cue cards because we were running dialogue down to him. In other words, we knew we needed a Jeff Abed scene in the restaurant, but we didn't know what it was. So we would board it for the next day. We're going to be shooting it, but that's an instance of not even having it the night before. We wrote those scenes an hour before, or even while they were doing the show. And that's the other. Look, you could do that with Danny. You couldn't do that so much with Chevy. Chevy needed cue cards for a whole other reason.
For like Marlon Brando reasons. Yeah.
Right. But, the actors, by the way, I didn't give them enough credit. The fact that they were so game for this, because not every group of actors would be, or at least five, six of them initially were game. And the other one didn't have much of a choice, and we would sort of limit how much of that he had to do. But they were they rolled with it, because I think they also had a sense that it was different and special, and it doesn't come along that often that you get to have this kind of fun show and play and be this experimental. But in many ways, Scrubs was a great training ground for Community, and even to some degree gave Garrett and I the knowledge of how to pull that kind of crazy shit off. Blame Bill for that.
But we're so thankful for it.
Yeah, as am I. It was not. There were some nights that were not fun. Even Dan would say. He'd be the first to say. I remember one writer who will remain nameless for now was dry heaving in the bathroom. He was a very calm guy, very placid, serene dude. I'll narrow it down and say he was a male. But I went into the bathroom and he was dry heaving because it was his table read. His table read was in 6 hours and we didn't have a script yet. And his name was on it. And no matter what, even though people knew that it was like very Dan heavy, if your name's on the script and there is no script, you're going to feel like everybody, all the powers that be, you're going to think it's your fault somehow. So I empathized immensely with that. That was me every week because as executive producers, we were the ones responsible for making sure this machine would run on time, and oftentimes it didn't. Oftentimes, all the executives would be assembled for the table read at, let's say, 11 on Monday, and I have to go down there and do like a literal song and dance. Well, not literal, but do somewhat of a song and dance because they were upstairs still writing the third act, and we weren't going to have it for another hour. And those scripts came right off the copy machine when the writers got them. I'm sorry, when the actors got them at the table read, they were literally hot off the press.
Wow.
Sometimes we had no idea what Dan did in the third act. He just was like, I'm going to write third act. You go down there. I'll meet you there. And when we got to the third act, I'd look at him, and he'd just go, I don't know. We'll fix it later, at the table, when it was like just clearly a phoned-in third act at the table read.
Wild. Just laying down the track as the train's moving, just constantly.
That's a great analogy, and even more extreme than that. But there is a relationship between that and what you see on TV, as you guys were sort of alluding to earlier. The crazy late nights, it's hard to know what comes first. Like, the ideas sometimes were born out of those crazy late night sessions when everybody's brains were fried, and we're all a little punchy. They sort of were one and the same. It was I remember also there were 2 writers who showed up mid-season, a writing team that we got as reinforcements, and one of them was supposed to go to Vietnam and canceled his trip to come onto the show. And his first night there was an all-nighter, and I saw him. He decided to go to. For some reason, he took his pants off and was curled up under a desk trying to fall asleep at some point for a couple hours. And I was like, "Welcome to Vietnam. You're here."
Oh man,
it's and I still occasionally, when I'm on the Paramount lot, if I walk by our office space and I get our former office is there, I'll walk by and I'll get the smell of the office, and I will get PTSD sort of.
Yeah, sure.
It's a combination of PTSD from how nerve-wracking it was at times, and a great sense of like, man, I wish we could do more, and I can be part of it. So it's a weird combination of feelings that wash over me. But yeah.
I like how you keep pretending that you're not going to do more.
I honestly don't know if I am, for various reasons.
Sure.
But I do think that I was saying to these guys earlier, I don't know anything, but I think there'll be more.
I think it's only a smart idea to at least consider doing the movie.
Yeah, there'll be a movie. There may be more. We'll see. I wouldn't be not because I know anything.
Right.
Given the fact that they're rebooting this show, that show, the other show. I don't know if it would be with the same actors. I don't know. As long as it's with the important thing is, look, ideally it's with Dan and everybody Dan wants to be in the show.
Sure.
But he's like I was saying, these guys earlier, he's by far the most important part. And he's indicated, I think, a number of times that he'd be happy to do it. Just gotta, get over this.
Just beat COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah. Back to Scrubs for a moment, and it's really just a moment. I have 2 friends that have worked in hospitals their entire lives, and they frequently talk about how accurate the show is in terms of like what happens in hospitals and how like the process of being an RN and like going through school and all that stuff works. So 1, good job, I guess. 2, like what did you guys like on purpose fact check that stuff, or did it just happen that you had people that kind of knew how that stuff happened? Because you have shows like ER where people are like, that's not how any of this works. And Scrubs gets like high grades across the board most of the time when people look at it for accuracy.
It's interesting. We did get a lot of our stories from doctors. I'll tell you one story in a second that is an example of sometimes truth being even stranger than fiction. Yeah, we get that a lot. How it was. Some of them say it was most realistic. No, we had a doctor on set, John Dorsey. Ironically, the main title, the X-rays on backwards, in the short version of the main title. We got a lot of shit for that. And John Doris, who's the real JD, who is the guy that the show's based on, could not believe he wasn't there that day because he's like, I'm the medical advisor for the show, and the fucking X-rays on backwards, so people are going to think I am the worst doctor of all times. But then we're like, no, I mean it was intentional because they're new doctors, so they throw it backwards. They're scrubs, get it? And he was like, no, you guys fucked up. And then we fixed it and we did a longer version, and then he was happy. But then we needed more time for the show and less time for the credits, so we said, all right, we're going back to the fuck that version. So it was a combination of having him around to sort of keep us honest. It was a combination of getting stories, but also like a lot of things we get from people are like not so much that what happened or what happens in the show is accurate or in addition to it, just the emotional, like the sort of it captured for people the sense, the surreality of being a doctor. You know, it captured the weirdness of it and the high stakes and the being strung out and all of the sort of the big, all of the, you know, various emotions that are felt during the course of a shift. A lot of people felt like it was very true to their experience, just emotionally, and experientially. The quick story I was going to tell you was we actually were told a story by an intern where they were on a psych ward, and there was one patient who thought they were Jesus, and there was another patient who thought they were Satan. And so the doctors thought it would be funny to put Jesus and Satan in the same room and see that. So we thought that would be a great story. So we wrote it, we shot it. When we watched it, and nothing magical happened. It was a guy that looked like Jesus because he, you know, wasn't magical. It was like he obviously grew his hair long and whatever. And the guy who was kind of like tatted up, and I can't remember what the Satan looked like. We shot it. When we watched it, we, the writers, went, you know what? That feels like we're making that up. It feels fake. And Bill had the wherewithal. And by the way, there were lots of other stories we came up with where we used the germ of a real thing that happened, or a real medical story, or whatever. We still had to make stuff up. But Bill's like, this just feels like a completely fake storyline, and I'm going to yank it from the show. And he pulled the whole thing. And so the irony was always that here we had the story that was literally true, and some not only true, but we heard it firsthand from a doctor who at least claimed that he did it. And we thought, okay, well, if it's true, then it's great. And in that instance, it wasn't. So that's kind of interesting. It is gratifying to hear, even though the goal wasn't necessarily to be like a documentary by any means, or to document the experience. But you know, I do think it was Bill's vision to capture the drama and the comedy and the craziness. You know, there's some seasons of that too where we look back and go, what were we thinking? Like there's some fantasies that in my head, if you told me the joke, I go, yeah, that was one of JD's fantasies, and it wasn't. Like there was a joke where JD put Turk put JD in his backpack and they went to a movie theater, and it wasn't a fantasy. And there's another episode where the janitor built like a life-size sandcastle in the parking lot that he was like living in. That also was not a fantasy. So there were seasons of that show where we lost our minds, and we would do this like, we call it State of the Show. We do that on Community too. I think Dan, if I recall, would always like yell State of the Show. I might be making that up, or somebody would yell that. But where you go, you take stock, and as hard as these episodes are to produce, and as you see, like sometimes you just don't have any room to breathe. You're just doing them by the skin of your teeth. You would still attempt every once in a while to stop and go, okay, what have we done? What's working? What's not working? How do we tweak it? By the way, what do the fans think? Like, Community is a great example of a show between message boards that used to exist on Scrubs and Community, and tweets even, like getting real-time feedback from fans, you know, not just like, oh, that was awesome, but I mean, that was nice, but what they didn't like, what they liked, reading the AV Club reviews, reading those were new at the time. Like the fact that actual every episode was getting written up in blogs, and we and Dan, we would read those and take those to heart, and not always agree with them, but sometimes there was more fan the fans contributed more than they know to both of those shows simply by, again, by their feedback, by their episode reviews, and that was cool. That was fun.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's amazing. I know if I was doing a show as an actor and I got feedback on a regular basis, that'd be mortifying. Were there any times where because you were saying you took those to heart, which I get, feedback is great and it's really exciting when you find something. For me, the really juicy ones are the ones where it's like, it's definitely not a positive note, but there's so much room for growth that comes with the note. Those are the ones that I love getting. Were there any things that you distinctly remember reading that either completely changed the way you thought about something, or even a note that you got that you wanted to just ignore but you couldn't shake, it just rattled you and you felt terrible, or even on the opposite side, a note that just brought you immense joy to see that what you did was working?
Yes, that's a great question. There were certainly times Garrett and I wrote the episode of Scrubs where Brendan Fraser died. It was called My Screw Up, and it was a Sixth Sense sort of deal where it was a reveal at the end, and we were very nervous about whether people would get it. Frankly, one of the network executives said he showed it to his wife, and she didn't understand it. He explained to her, "Oh shit!" But we didn't. It was kind of too late. We couldn't change it, and so it aired, and we went right to those boards. We were waiting for the feedback. And this is an example of a time it didn't work that great, where suddenly we started seeing messages pop up. And again, back then there was a literal Scrubs website and people were posting on the message board. It had its 30 or 40 regulars. And then people were like, "Oh my God, he's dead." And we were like, whew. It's like a sigh of relief and elation that people got it, because it was there were things we could have done to sort of spoon feed it more. But we tried to play it artfully, and you never know. You can never look at it with fresh eyes necessarily. And the only fresh eyes we'd heard to that point was someone who didn't get it. So that was a great relief.
Right.
And we were super happy about that. I'm trying to think about, there are probably too numerous to mention the times where someone said something that hurt a little bit. But, where it became useful was when when it felt like there was a consensus. Someone's always going to say something. We've all
sure.
We've been in focus groups where people say things to say things, or they say things to troll, or say whatever. Where it became a little bit more constructive was when Emily at the AV Club, but she was very, very helpful in terms of having super being a fan of the show, but she also, as much a fan she was, she would hold her feet to the fire when something wasn't working. Go, nah, didn't like it, didn't care for it, And like I said, the comment section was interesting because sometimes there would be debates between two people who, best episode ever, worst episode ever. You probably see that on any show. One of the things that one critic said in particular, and I can't remember who this was, but she did say that she felt that our concept episodes were a little distancing. I mentioned this earlier, that it prevented her from getting too sucked in. And I remember there was one episode that was a turning point for her where she's like, "Okay, I get it now. And I think it was Remedial Chaos Theater, where she's like, that was a extreme example of them being meta and playing with it, but yet in the service of learning something new about these characters, in the service of an idea, as opposed to in the service of being sort of masturbatory meta. Look at us, we're showing off. Look what we can do. So that was that's another example, I guess, of a very gratifying comment that I made, where someone who was skeptical and sort of goes, I think her thing was she's like, I admire the show, but I can't get into the show. Was sort of her take until I believe it was that episode when she's like, all right, now it clicked for me. It was better late than never. But also nice to know that even somebody who was maybe put off initially, there is a learning curve to that show for some people.
Sure, yeah. I've experienced that with other shows myself. I think most notably for me, not to go too far off, but this is what we do on a regular basis. I remember when I first started watching, Parks and Rec, I couldn't get into it until season 2 started, right. And that's a thing sometimes, but it's always exciting to see when those shifts happen, and like sometimes they're really subtle but really impactful, and it's just really exciting to hear that like you were seeing that real time and like being able to like learn from that and grow from that. I think that's kind of like just like early, almost like open source.
It is, and you can't take
Sick.
it. You can't take it too much to heart, and you can't get because
Right.
there are going to be the naysayers, and there are going to be people who be dicks.
Mhm.
But if you know how to read it, and you go into it saying, all right, well, let's see if anything constructive can come out of it. Sometimes it can, and sometimes you just keep doing your own thing, and you see other people catching on to what you're doing. But just having that just did not exist, when like however many years ago. I mean, pre-internet, so I'm going back quite a ways. But that type of like instant, not just reactions, but that type of conversation, dialogue between not just fans of the show, but between fans in the show and the creators of the show, just is a relatively new thing.
Right.
And as a like I said, as an actor, as a writer, there's something really cool about, especially in television, where you don't get to see everybody in a movie theater watching your show and reacting to it. At least getting some feedback, in some cases love, in some cases hate, in some cases constructive criticism. Getting it that way is something I really like.
I have this whole you were talking about chaos theory, and my brain made like several jumps. It went from chaos theory to darkest timeline to a topic. I don't know if you've covered this already while I wasn't here, and I don't mean to be insensitive, but I'd love to get your thoughts on the gas leak, and what was the environment shift like? What did that happen? Because I remember for me, the thing that was different for me was the function of the meta-ness in that season, like the way that I believe there was darkest timeline. Some of the characters started showing up in a fantastical way, and it was just like what was the process like? What's it like to have a show that goes through such a drastic shift at a certain point?
Yeah, I alluded to it earlier. I wasn't there. I left when Dan left at season 3. That shift did not happen. That shift did not happen because I left. It happened because Dan left.
Sure.
Garrett and I fully anticipated that would happen if Dan left, which is why we did not want to take over the show in season 4. That was a no-win situation. It wasn't the writers' fault that season. I was saying earlier, I do think that show is so Dan specific, and I told these guys we used to call the rewrite sometimes harmonization. You would harmonize a script.
Yeah.
Meaning, like, even if the script was, there are some writers on that show who just nailed the voices of the show. It still needed to go through Dan's hand for calibration, not just in terms of the voices of the characters, but what you're alluding to, which is interesting, which is like, so that things felt natural and didn't feel forced. And when I watched it, I only watched the first episode of season 4 out of curiosity, and I felt the same exact thing, which was that something is off here. And I told these guys earlier, I think Megan was on that year, and Andy Barbara was on that year, I think. And there were certainly some writers, there's some continuity of terrific writers who made it. Now, they weren't the writers who were in charge of the show. But the other thing is that there was a mandate from above that those writers, to their credit, didn't really heed to, because they knew they were between a rock and a hard place. It's part of the reason that Garrett and I didn't want to take over. It's a no-win situation, because if you tried to emulate Dan, you would fail because you weren't Dan. Just like you'd like to believe that someone tried to emulate any of us, they wouldn't be able to, because they're not you.
Right.
Dan's a genius and all, but we all have our individual voices. And Dan's individual voice was all over that show, and it colored everything. The other factor was that there was a mandate from above to change the show, to normalize the show. They didn't want the show to be as weird. They thought in season 4 somehow maybe they could have the show they wanted from day one, which was just a bunch of people going to community college and living their life and dating and getting into fights, but without zombies and without chicken finger fights and without 7 different timelines.
Right.
So I think they were in a really tough spot where they were like, we need to do what we were hired to do, which is to quote unquote normalize. But by the same token, they didn't want to alienate the very loyal small but loyal fan base they had.
Sure.
They didn't want to chase them away by making the show something completely different. And again, just by virtue of not having Dan in that room and Dan taking the pass and Dan not being the showrunner, it was going to feel different.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I just the word that comes to mind when hearing you talk about it is, and it's something I've been thinking about a lot personally, and I've also talked, I think, with Caleb and Kevin about, with just like, even with like, it's just the way that season is very intertextual. So like it relies on the fact that the audience knows what's going on from the previous seasons, but in itself it is something different. So it's and with that comes the difficulty of how do you make something that refers to where it came from, but different. It's like when you look at, I don't know, say like the remake of The Lion King, the live action Lion King or something like that. And there's moments that are shot for shot from the original and you get this like sense of nostalgia. But then once that ends, it's a different thing. There isn't necessarily a new thing that supports it. And in this case, it's the tone because Dan's not there.
It isn't even hear you speak in those terms. There's like this cognitive dissonance that happens.
Right.
It's the same but different. And it may even been over relying on references to earlier episodes to some degree to as a way to say to people, hey, we're the same show.
Right. You know? Yeah.
We don't sound the same and look the same. So again, anybody in that spot, in that showrunner position, and the guys who were in there are very good writers and smart people. And I think they were even aware while they were doing it of how fraught it was and what an impossible task they were asked to do, which is keep the audience you have, but also gain a whole other audience, make it be the same, and that's what you're describing is the result of those type of decisions from on top. And again, that's when when Joel, I think, spearheaded or at least was part of the impetus to get Dan rehired. It was, I think it was just it was like saying this to the powers that be. See, this is why.
Right.
You know, and you just have to accept that the show, if you don't like it, you don't like it, but there are a lot of people that do.
Mm-hmm.
And, so we're going to say, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're totally fine. I was just thinking about, it's interesting when I look back at it now, because the first time I watched the show, I didn't come into Community until after all of it had been aired already. Like, it was, done to completion. And I watched it, just binged it all the way through. And I didn't have any history backing me. And I actually didn't notice for a while that season was different. Like, it just, there was something like when you watch it, just like going straight through it, there are so many, I think it's a testament to how good of a job the writers did, is like they were able to fundamentally grab the pillars and just hold on tight while you're trying to, it's like, the image coming to mind is if you were to take a house and try and lift the whole thing up and change out the foundation. It's like they did a really good job of keeping the house together while trying to shift something really integral to its essence, And so I remember in my viewing going through it, it was season 4, I was it's the same house. And then upon further inspection, I was wait, something very minute yet essential.
Wait a minute.
It's a very weird. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there are other shows with the same history. I think Seinfeld, Larry David left and came back. I mean, there are other examples, but none that I can think of that had that drastic. And again, having just seen one episode, but even hearing what you're saying and what others have said, seems like very clear.
I mean, the biggest difference as the viewer is that's the season of Changnesia, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's the one thing I think. My theory is that essentially upon first viewing, that plot line is so dumbfoundingly distracting yet enticing, but so bizarre.
Weird. It's so
it kind
weird.
of, it does this magical little, it's like this, the magician going, look over here, and you're just oh, okay, yeah, and you kind of buy it because Chang is such a curveball character to begin with that you're just oh, this is the direction we're going. Okay, cool.
It's even my son, who's 9, and started watching the show. I was telling these guys after he found my the Western paintball gun that Dan bought everybody after season 2, and thought I had a gun in the house, and then I said no. I mean, yes. No. Show. I think when we got to season 4, there was a little bit of it wasn't that he articulated it. He was just he lost. He started to lose interest, And either it's coincidence because he just had community fatigue, But I was kind of like, why don't you skip to season 5 and see if that works for you? I don't know if he's done yet, but I'm curious to see if it feels different.
Daddy, it feels like the original spirit of the show is missing. Daddy, the integral voice of our favorite show is gone.
Did Uncle Dan return?
First of all, how do you know that's what my son sounds like?
Kevin, you cannot answer that question. Do not answer that question.
There is no good answer, so I'm letting the uncomfortable silence sit untouched. There's no correct answer.
No.
I don't know what happened. I think I'm worried that someone stole my paintball gun because it used to be in my office. I wanted to show you guys. I'm very proud of it. It's my prized possession. Maybe it's my son's room.
Okay, I have another question that may have already been asked, but I need to know. Paintball episodes. As an actor, I know that prop weapons are like big precaution kind of thing. Were there any live paintball guns on set? And did anybody get hit by an actual paintball?
Another good question. I think there were some live paintballs, although I think we painted most of them in afterwards. There may have been live paintballs against. I don't think any of the paintballs that someone was hit by were live. I do recall there being people on the set ensuring everybody's safety during all of that.
Mm-hmm.
I think they were all painted in.
Because there's two moments that come to mind. There's the two paintballs hitting each other shot, and then the other one is Chang with the double Uzi type moment going on.
Yeah.
And those are the ones where I look at it and I'm like, were those done with paintball guns? Like, did they actually?
I think those may have been.
Mm-hmm.
I think as long as somebody wasn't getting hit by a paintball, it may have been real most of the time. Not all the time, because again, it was like someone had to clean this shit up.
Sure.
A lot of it was stickers.
Oh, the other
Next time,
question.
just cover the school in paint.
Right.
Oh, we kind of did that.
The question that comes to mind, now you say someone had to clean it up. Was it the third paintball iteration with the sprinklers?
Yeah.
What was? Was that just like? Did they just say, "Fuck it, we gotta spray the whole set with paint"? Or
was that what season was that?
That's the end of 2. That's the Star Wars themed paintball finale.
Yeah.
I don't remember, and this will be a good callback right off the bat. I don't remember because my son was born that week, and I don't think I was there for the production.
Oh, nice.
Excuses.
My son who sounds something like this.
Daddy, I know you wanted to be on set for the big paintball episode, but I'm sorry I was born.
Oh no!
I remember.
Why did you say it like that?
My wife was pregnant, obviously, and it was the morning of the first. We had written the script, but it was starting. We were shooting it, and she's like, "My water broke," and I was like, "Yes, I don't have
to worry about this one." Oh.
Garrett, Dan, rest of you gang, Russo's, you got this, and they did, by the way. No, I mean, I was there some days. I wasn't there the first day. I don't remember. I could find out and get back to you on that from Joe Russo.
I'd love that. You don't need to, but that would be exciting if you did.
That would be great.
It's whether the paint really came out of the sprinklers, right?
Or just like what that process was like, like I guess like did you actually do sprinklers, but also just like how did you manage cleanup?
Yeah, I'll get you an answer on that.
Wow.
In part 2.
In part 2, yeah, sure.
Excellent.
It's sad to find out that no one got shot with paintballs, because I really thought you shot Jim Rash in the forehead with a paintball.
I don't remember. It's sad. It was 10 years ago. And
sure.
There are some of those details that, like the writing stuff, I kind of remember. The production stuff's I'm a little fuzzier on, partly because we weren't always able to be on set as much as we wanted to be. But that one I wouldn't have an excuse, because the reason we weren't on set is because we were back in the writer's room writing. And that one was the last one of the season. So somebody knows, and I will get you that answer. We'll do a whole episode of the podcast devoted to the answer to that question.
Wait, okay.
Oh, perfect.
We're talking about paintball guns, and now I have one other question that came to mind.
Oh God, Jay.
I know. I'm sorry. So, what is conspiracy theories?
Yeah.
Were you in the room when that was being written, and what was it like talking to each other about? And then this guy walks in and shoots them, and then repeat. Like what? What was that process?
I was telling these guys earlier, it was crazy. That was one of the episodes where we used to call it a bridge to nowhere. Well, not necessarily at Community, but where we had 2 acts and couldn't figure out the resolve. And that one, we put ourselves into such a corner plot-wise. It really took a while. And I think it may have been McKenna, Chris McKenna, who cracked that. But I was the asshole who had to go pitch it to the network and say, "This is what we're doing."
Oh, God.
And I remember being met with just like utter silence and confusion. And I just had to say, as I had to say so many times, what I really wanted to say was, ship has sailed. That's it. That's what we're doing. See you on set. But I had to say, trust me, it'll work. But yeah, it was, I was in the room. I did not come up with a solution. It was, I do remember it being a great relief when we finally did. We all were just dying laughing. And I remember that feeling of all right, now I got to try to sell this to studio network. But knowing I had Dan behind me, I really didn't have to. And I was telling these guys too, that year we made Time hoodie wrap gifts for everybody. That was basically a Greendale hoodie that on the hood. I kind of wish we did this differently. Actually, it was I got lazy. I was just write Time hoodie on the rim of the hood. So it's kind of nerdy because it just says, and it's backwards. So you wear it, the hood is hanging, and people are trying to turn their heads to see what the hell it says. It says Time. If you see me on the street. Perfect. But that was, I mentioned one of my favorites, Professor Professorson.
It just gets me.
They were really not keen on did I just say keen? I don't know that I've ever used keen in a sentence.
Well, but now you did.
I'll allow it.
You're welcome.
They were not, they did not love the idea of the gun in that one either. But it was so ridiculous, of gunplay, but it was so ridiculous that they gave in. And again, at the end of the day, they didn't have a choice. It was that or nothing. Dan was willing to be the sort of bad guy a lot of times when it came to stuff like that, and had the balls to say, "This is what we're doing," and that's what good showrunners do. A lot of showrunners are afraid to because they're afraid that their job is on the line. And Dan's job kind of was, not necessarily with that moment, cumulative moment, but the beauty part was he just said, "All right, well then I'll leave. If you don't want me, I'll go." And he did. And then, like I said, most powerful. The reason I keep saying he's the most powerful showrunner in Hollywood is because if you've been fired and then you've been asked back, well, you're not going to fire me now.
You can do anything.
Good job, fucking losers. You're stuck with me now.
What happens if I leave? You're not going to do this again, right?
Game over.
It's that if you come at the king, you best not miss thing.
Yeah, sure.
That's right.
And they came at him, but
I can't imagine the hat in hands, shoe in mouth approach to yep, we fired you and they can't do it without you. So would you come back?
Hey Dan, it's NBC.
Look, it happens, and I don't know that. I can't remember to what degree it was mutual. I don't think it was. I don't think Dan wanted to go. I know he was tired after 3 years of it. And in a way, maybe the fact that he had one way I think of it is maybe the fact that he had a year off rejuvenated him to give us 5 and 6. So that you never know how it would have turned out otherwise. But yeah, it's tricky, and part of me too wishes I was there because again, I was the one who kept saying we need Dan. He's the key. He's the key to this, and it doesn't take a genius to see that. But it was not. I didn't know him from a hole in the wall, and then by episode 2 or 3, I was like, holy shit. He just took the script and made it 10 times better and more specific. And and your job as a writer on a writing staff is to figure out how to write in the voice of your boss these characters, but you can only do that to a certain degree.
Sure.
Especially with a show where it's so indelible that mark.
Yeah, that's so cool.
And I'm just throwing out big words like indelible and keen.
Yeah.
It sounds great. You said like if you're faking it right now, it's perfect.
Yeah, keen's not a big word, but it's
a high value word. It's like whenever you drop like a 2-letter word with a Q in Scrabble, it's like it's small, but it gets the job done.
Exactly.
That's perfect. And I appreciate you giving us so much of your time and telling us all of these like great stories, things I hadn't realized about fingers up particular butts. I do appreciate that.
What did I miss?
Oh, we'll tell you about the finger butt.
He said, "Don't tell him." Yeah. That's what you get, Jay. Sorry.
That's the secret.
Cut it out of the podcast.
Just for us.
Don't ever.
They missed it. They don't get it. That's just sorry, bud.
Sorry.
Hey, you know what? I'll eat that. That's on me.
You deserve to know. You asked great questions, and I'm sorry you weren't here from the beginning. Basically, it was the Subway episode. There's a joke in that episode where the Subway character, we allude to the fact that Britta stuck her finger in his ass.
Oh, that's what that moment is.
And then,
yes.
And the title of the episode is Digital Exploration of Interior Spaces, which is alluding to that. So,
like
digit exploring.
I've never made that connection. Wow, that is. Thank you for
mind blown.
Possibly the greatest Easter egg of my entire life.
If nothing else, take that away.
I will
thank you guys for the great questions and for your continued interest in the show and your podcast, which is great. And I hope and do believe you will be rewarded with more of this show in some form or fashion in the hopefully near future.
I'd like that.
I think that would be okay. Asked you questions you didn't have immediate answers for. So
what's that?
We have to have you back now because we asked you questions you didn't have answers for.
That's true. I will get answers for those really important questions. And no, I'm sorry, I don't remember. It's like I wish I had that kind of memory, but I don't remember it.
All good.
It's weird. I don't like that. I want to have that stuff at my fingertips.
I kind of like, it reminds me of a quote that I love as an actor with like live theater. That someone I am very fond of used to say, I think they even had it tattooed on their skin. They said, "We build sandcastles." And it's kind of the idea that it's like, we might not remember it or it might not exist forever in the future, you know, but like the fact that we did it, the joy of that moment kind of exists in that time. And there's something kind of beautiful about those things that you just can't fully remember, but you remember how it made you feel. So
it made me feel so much better about being old. Thank you. You did. Seriously. We build. Wait, I forgot what it was already.
It's we build sandcastles. It's we as a group we build sandcastles.
Right,
we
they're
put
not
together.
They serve their purpose and then they get washed away.
Time washes them away, and that's kind of the beauty of it. Yeah.
Thank you guys a lot. I will get you those questions. I will get you some of that stuff I promised, and and thank you.
No, thank you so much for coming on. Of course. You need to go make sure your kid doesn't shoot somebody with your paintball gun.
Maybe that's where it went.
Exactly.
Yeah, I got to find that gun too. All right. Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.
This has been a Talkback Podcast.
That was quite a show. Very entertaining.
Well, he was cool.
What a nerd. What a...
I want to tell him you said that.